Or if you're someone who spends way too much time indoors, how do you make natural vitamin D? When the sun hits your skin, right, your body naturally produces this hormone. It's a pro-hormone called vitamin D, 25 hydroxy D3. Hello and welcome to the Weaponized Body Podcast. My name is Dr. Ryan Hewitt, and I'm your host. And today I'm super excited to give you this episode. It's one of my favorite topics, metabolic health. In particular, we're going to go over my top 10 weaponized body biomarkers that you should be measuring after the age of 35. This is a topic I'm super passionate about, mostly because so many people do not get the blood work that they need in order to know exactly what's going on under the hood. This is exactly why I got into this space. As a chiropractor, I was always helping people with their physical movement, with their function, their health, their flexibility, their mobility, performance, all that stuff from a physical standpoint. But I came to realize after a certain period of time that there was a critical piece that I was missing, and it wasn't just one piece, it was several pieces, but one of them in particular was what was going on with people under the hood. And people would come to me with their blood work, and I have to say that the vast majority of blood work that people were coming to me with was absolutely just laughable. It's pathetic what people are getting in order to give them, a clear bill of health every year at their physical. Most of the time, panels just consisted of, a general lipid panel, basic metabolic panel, and a CBC, which, by the way, those things are critical, but there's so much missing and so much to be desired that I believe strongly people should be investing in. If they're wanting to know exactly what's going on with their health, they should be investing the money, regardless if their insurance companies are going to reimburse them for these tests. Just invest the dollars to know what's going on under the hood, and sit with a practitioner who's actually going to go over your blood work with you and tell you about what it looks like, converse with you about what's going on with your life, your lifestyle, your history, your supplementation, your hydration, your nutrition, your stress, your sleep, etc. And try to put together this puzzle of, okay, well, why are these biomarkers starting to lag? Why are these ones looking like they're in a good place? That way you have some feedback and some general understanding of what you're doing is working, other than what you see in the mirror and what's going on with maybe your wearables, on, what the scale says, etc. Metabolic health is just very, very critical, in my opinion, which is the basis of why I started Weaponized Wellness, the company in which I own and operate, and I'm currently growing. And people are loving the panels and the consults that we're doing. And of course, the options that were being made available to people in order to help them optimize, particularly their hormonal health. So that's a whole other discussion. We're going to get into some hormone health in later episodes, but today we're just going to go over like a general overview of like what are the top 10 biomarkers you might be missing on your blood panel you should be investing in. So let's go over, this is in no particular order of importance. This is just ones that I routinely don't see on general panels that I order for patients. So number one, we'll lump in fasting insulin in with this whole, metabolic health discussion. So most people are getting a fasting blood sugar measurement. Very rarely am I seeing like an A1C blood sugar or a fasting insulin. But this one's a very important number. First of all, if your fasting blood sugar is over 90 and you've slept a full night and you've fasted a full 8 to 10 hours, you have a problem. You have early insulin resistance issues. If you're over 90, if you're 90, 95, heaven forbid, triple digit. And what a lot of people don't realize is that it's not just an indication of how much sugar you're eating. A lot of people will think, right away, like, oh man, I got to stop eating sugar. But if you're not sleeping properly, if you sleep less than 5.5 hours a night, the chances are you're waking up like a full-blown type 2 diabetic when it comes to your blood sugar. And that influences your fasting insulin. And of course, over time, something called your hemoglobin A1C, which is more or less like a snapshot of how your blood sugar has been balanced over the course of ideally 90 days, right? Because your red blood cells should have a lifespan of 90 days if you're healthy. Fasting insulin is is a number I love to see, and I love to see close to the number 5, if not lower. Um, if you have, and insulin being one of the most important hormones in the body, you want to have ideally an A1C close to 5.0, ideally a fasting blood sugar under 90 in the 80s, and you want to have a fasting insulin single digit, preferably, that 5, you know, micro IU per ml or less. The implications of not having great fasting insulin is you're going to have like lower testosterone levels, you're going to have brain fog, you're going to have poor recovery, etc. So get your fasting insulin as well as your fasting blood sugar. Number 2, rarely do I see a high sensitive C-reactive protein on a general physical, which CRP tests are not expensive. It is a general inflammation test. So it doesn't tell you why or where you have inflammation. So it's not really indicative of any one specific condition. However, if you have anything over like 1 milligram per liter, there's a problem going on. Okay. Unless you've been sick, because if you've been sick or run down, you can have a higher CRP. CRP will elevate when your immune system is activated, inflammation, right? You're going to be inflamed if you have a cold or a flu or whatnot. But if you're like natural set point and you've got CRP levels over 1.0, it it massively increases your risk of all chronic diseases, heart disease, stroke, diabetes, uh, neurodegenerative diseases, arthritis, all this stuff. And it basically causes unwanted. Uh, it steals energy from your body. All right. Now, the most common CRP elevations that I see are people that have chronic allergies. And also, this one might shock you, people that have sleep apnea. I see people with sleep apnea that have high CRP levels, and you got to get that shit handled. It means you're not sleeping properly, you're not recovering, your brain's not getting enough oxygen. You're going to feel off and fatigued and inflamed, lowers your testosterone, all kinds of bad stuff. So you want to get this CRP measurement measured. You want that to be under 1.0. Number 3, free testosterone. Men and women. And by the way, what I'm talking about, the top 10 here applies to both men and women. Your free testosterone. Now, we're going to lump free testosterone in with total testosterone, sex hormone binding globulin, and estradiol. You want to have all of those measured on each panel you get. The free testosterone gives you a real understanding of what's your bioavailable testosterone in your body. What can those androgen receptors in your body use? Uh, Sex hormone binding globulin is a carrier protein of androgen hormones such as testosterone and estrogen. Whatever is unbound to sex hormone binding globulin is available. Whatever is bound to sex hormone binding globulin is unavailable. Now, your sex hormone binding globulin will elevate in all kinds of different scenarios, right? You do not want that elevated. You want it to be, under 40 ideally. But here's the deal. You want it to be in a particular ratio with your total testosterone. Your sex hormone binding globulin ideally is at a 20-to-1 ratio with your total testosterone. This is part of the equation that is used to decide what your free testosterone levels are. Your free testosterone, and it depends on your age, right? And your gender, of course. But men, you want to see ideally free testosterone over, 100 nanograms per deciliter. You want to see sex hormone binding globulin under 40 nanograms per deciliter. You want to see estradiol levels between ideally like 25 to 50 for most guys. Um, Women, it varies. You want to see that over 100 for women. Testosterone women, you want that to be ideally, total testosterone, we're talking, ideally between, 20 to 60. So different ranges there, but you want to know where you stand. Like, yeah, it's a snapshot in time, but the thing is you're going to have routine, regular blood work to give you feedback of where you stand. And the implications of not having your hormones dialed in are numerous, right? From anything from your confidence, your drive, your libido, your muscle, your recovery, et cetera, et cetera. So again, that's free and total testosterone, estradiol, and sex hormone binding globulin. We'll call that kind of like your hormone panel. Let's talk about when you get your cholesterol profile. Most people are used to getting like a total cholesterol, LDL, HDL, good and bad cholesterol, triglyceride, and then like a non-HDL cholesterol total. Now, the problem with that is it's a primitive understanding of what's going on with your lipoproteins. If you listen to any experts in longevity fields or cardiovascular health, you're going to hear them talk about this particle called ApoB. And ApoB is important because this is the one that is generally most connected to atherogenesis or atherosclerosis, heart disease, and also another particle called small dense LDLs. So you want to be measuring like your small dense LDLs and your ApoB particles. So it tells you really how many atherogenic or small dense LDL particles you're dealing with. Ideally, you want to see under 80 milligrams per deciliter. There's lots of stuff that can affect this number. Genetically, you could have like familial hypercholesterolemia. You can have a tendency to have a high number here. You have lots of control of this number, however, with the types of foods you eat. It depends on your genetics as well, which there's some important genetic tests you can do to find out if you're a hyperabsorber of cholesterol, for example. There's a test I love to do called ApoE genotypes. Your ApoE genotype can really determine like, hey, listen, if you want to lower your ApoBs, it's a great idea to, lower the amount of fat, particularly saturated fat, cholesterol containing foods, which that's bad news if you're sort of like a keto or paleo or a carnivore kind of person. But if it's really affecting your cardiovascular health, it's a big problem. However, there are some people that can do keto, paleo, carnivore, and have amazing looking lipids. It's really dependent on your genotype. So everybody's different. It's important to know this ApoB particle. Obviously, your cardiovascular risk hinges on this, and this is something it's very latent, right? It's not something that's going to be like a 5 alarm fire the first time you see it high. Like it takes years and years for heart disease to develop, but you want to get to know what your ApoB particles are early on so you can get a handle on it. Okay, so let's talk about another test, homocysteine. This is one of the things that was something I found early on. So, like a lot of people, I'm somebody that doesn't what's called methylate B vitamins very well, particularly B12 folic acid. I have an MTHFR genetic variant, it's called. Uh, However, what I didn't realize is due to this fact, like I was consuming B vitamins in my foods, clearly. I eat fruits, vegetables, meats, red meats, all that stuff. Um, Yet my B12 and folic acid were deficient, and something called my homocysteine was high. Now, homocysteine is like a silent destroyer of brain and heart tissue. Um, it's an elevated risk of like inflammation in your vessels. You do not want this. You want this to stay under 10 micromoles per liter. Mine, when I found it at the time, I think it was 18. Very easy fix. All I had to start doing was take methylated B vitamins. Boom. Magically, the number halved the next time I looked at it. Um, Very important for your cognitive health, your brain health, right? And then like silent vascular damage. Such an easy fix. Um, Hugely important. Measure your homocysteine, which brings me to my next one is make sure you're measuring your B12 and folate, right? This is especially important for someone who maybe doesn't eat very much of these B vitamins, vegan vegetarians. Those are deficient diets, in my opinion. Um, but you might have an MTHFR variant that makes those vitamins difficult for you to absorb. So, short of knowing that genetic variant, just measure your B12 folate and you can see, like, hey, am I having issues with absorption? Very easily prevented, with a methylated B vitamin complex or B12 folate vitamin that's pre-methylated. In other words, makes it more easily absorbable. Okay, the next one, number 7, is ferritin. Now, I'm constantly floored that ferritin and serum iron levels are not measured on routine physical blood work panels. Um, on occasion you'll see the you know iron absorption rates on there. Rarely will you see a ferritin level. I'm very passionate about getting people to measure their ferritin levels, especially men. Well, that's not true. Men and women, um, but here's the thing. So this is something that I discovered with myself is, I believe I haven't had the genetic test yet, but I think that I have a variant that makes it more likely for me to hang on to iron. It's like a hemochromatosis variant, which one of my family members, I have an uncle who has a hemochromatosis variant, and his ferritin, I think, was off the charts when he tested it. And lo and behold, you would never think this guy is like, an athlete, never smoked, didn't drink much, ideal body weight, and he ended up with diabetes. What I think happened is he ended up having horribly high ferritin levels for so many years. It was undetected that it caused organ damage, which is exactly what happens. When I started to measure my ferritin levels at one point were upwards of 750. I had bags under my eyes. I had heart palpitations. I had joint pain. I had liver enzyme elevations. Elevated ferritin is very dangerous. And ferritin, what it is it's your storage form of iron. Okay. It's very important. You want that to be, between 100 to 200 nanograms per milliliter. Mine was like 7 to 8 times that. Okay, when that happens, it causes inflammation because it will deposit into your organs. Um, so that's very important to know. What are your ferritin levels? When your ferritin levels are too low, it can contribute to a condition called anemia. So a lot of women I see in my office have this very low ferritin level, particularly anyone who's eating a deficient diet, anyone who's had heavy menstrual cycles and they haven't been able to rebuild their blood. You need 3 things to build a red blood cell. You need iron, you need B12, and you need copper. So if you're deficient in any of those things, it can cause, red blood cells to get really small and less in number. So ferritin is very, very important. You don't want iron overload. It can cause insulin resistance, inflammation, as I mentioned, which is the symptoms are like fatigue, joint pain. Low ferritin is no good either, right? Because it can contribute to things like anemia. So make sure you're getting ferritin levels measured as well as your serum iron too. Um, Number 8, nobody's going to be surprised to hear this one, but how often do I see this on a general physical? Almost never, which is vitamin D. Vitamin D is such an easy thing to measure. Just measuring your serum vitamin D, it's you want that to be between 50 to 80 nanograms per milliliter. One of the most common, if not almost every panel that I ever look at with anybody who's never paid attention to vitamin D is always deficient, especially if you live or if you're someone who spends way too much time indoors. How do you make natural vitamin D? When the sun hits your skin, right? Your body naturally produces this hormone. It's a pro hormone called vitamin D, 25 hydroxy D3. So if you're not sufficient in vitamin D, there's like endless problems that can occur, right? One in particular is like you're immune deficient, your bone health suffers, but also things like your hormones suffer, your energy suffers, etc. It's one of those things that it's needed for almost everything in your body. You want that to be between 50 to 80 nanograms per milliliter. Everyone needs to know their vitamin D levels. Get them checked yearly at minimum. Very easy to fix with a supplement if you don't get enough sun. Trust me, you definitely want to get it as naturally as possible, being outdoors, having some skin exposure like your arms and torso or legs in the sun. You only need 20 to 30 minutes of sun. And here's my advice. Like, okay, if you're someone who's very concerned about getting sun, for wrinkles or skin cancer, which most of that is a lot of it is like hysterical. You want to get like 15 minutes of sun with no sunscreen on first. Let your body produce natural vitamin D, then you can put clothes on or your whatever you want to put on your skin, to sunscreen ish. You want to make sure you're getting naturally produced vitamin D. It's way better than a supplemented vitamin D, right? Research has shown that supplementing vitamin D isn't like a panacea. It's not a cure all. It's not something that's gonna fix your vitamin D deficiency completely. It's better than having deficient vitamin D, but you want to get it as naturally as possible. Let's talk about number 9, thyroid stimulating hormone. So, we're seeing a trend here. We're seeing that hormonal health is very important, right? So that kind of like hormone panel, insulin. Now we're going to talk about TSH. The thyroid's a very complicated organ. It's in your throat. It's very important for almost like every metabolic process in your body. Your brain produces, or your pituitary in specific, produces something called TSH. Now, a lot of physicals will include this TSH number, which is important. There's a feedback loop in your body that exists that is regulated through this TSH hormone. It's the signal hormone to tell your thyroid to make T3 and T4 hormone. Of course, T3 being the active form of thyroid hormone. Most of it is converted in the liver. So you need optimal liver health, you need optimal thyroid health, and you need optimal neurological signaling. The TSH is sort of like, at the top of the list for things you want to measure with thyroid. Now, underneath, you also have like reverse T3, T3, free T3, T4, free T4, thyroid antibodies, etc. There's a lot of things you can test with the thyroid, but getting at the very minimum a thyroid stimulating hormone, you want to see that between 1 and 3. Between 1 and 3 is nice. It typically means that the signaling mechanisms are happening appropriately. It doesn't mean you absolutely don't have thyroid dysfunction, but it's a good indicator that most of the time things are happening in check. And then lastly, number 10 on my list, and this is a new addition once I started to get a lot more in understanding of how critical hormones are, especially after the age of 35 for both men and women. It's called IGF-1. It's called insulin-like growth factor 1. This is a marker of growth hormone function. So this also declines naturally with age. So it's not something that stays, high indefinitely. But here's what I know. If you want ideal IGF-1 signaling, growth hormone signaling, which is, that's really critical for that. It's like our anti-aging hormone. You want to make sure you're strength training. Okay, lifting weights, putting stress on your muscles and bones. You want to make sure that you are sleeping properly. Okay, a nice uninterrupted, like 6 to 8 hours of sleep, preferably when the sun goes down and wake when the sun comes up. And making sure that you are having an intermittent fast. Okay, that you have periods of time where you're not eating. Okay, it doesn't have to be a big long starvation period, just a nice intermittent fast. And so sleep, lifting weights, and eating protein. Making sure you're eating enough protein. I just saw the most ridiculous post by PETA, of course, who's saving all the animals. They said that you don't need a gram of protein per pound of body weight. It's ridiculous. You can eat a couple pieces of tofu and save the world, which is complete blasphemy, ridiculous. You absolutely need enough protein to make sure that you are signaling protein synthesis, that you're maintaining muscle mass, making sure that you're producing IGF-1 and, staying healthy. So don't listen to that ridiculousness. So between 150 to 250 nanograms per milliliter is wonderful for most people. Ideally, I love to see over 200, even better. Um, I bet you didn't know that IGF-1 is more predictive of aging and recovery ability than testosterone, and that's what some studies will show. Like I said, it's like your anti-aging hormone. So, of course, if you're deficient in this hormone, you're going to have shitty recovery, slow muscle growth, joint pain and joint issues, all that kind of stuff. So, those are 10 biomarkers. If you recognize that you're not even getting a single one of these done on like your routine physical, all right? So it doesn't necessarily mean you need a new doctor, it just means you need to invest some money and some time into looking for somebody who's going to test these things that are more indicative of like, hey, you want to make sure you're looking at these things before you're just throwing supplements against the wall or deciding you need like TRT or you need some sort of like, some crazy supplement that, grows on some magical tree in Africa. Like, always go by the data. So those 10 biomarkers, those are things that I think everyone over 35, never mind, you can start doing those sooner, but in specific over 35, you need to know those numbers. And if those numbers are not ideal, then you got to talk to someone who's going to put the puzzle together for you, who's going to do a great consultation, who's going to know and not only ask you questions about like, hey, what drugs do you take and what supplements do you take, but also like what's your lifestyle like? What's your stress like? What's your water intake like? What's your routine movement schedule? What do you do for workouts? What's your routine eating schedule? What are your eating habits? How much alcohol do you drink? So on and so forth. So all of these things matter. It's all part of the puzzle of what we can do to optimize because I love working with people that want to have the best possible health, performance, recovery. They want to optimize. Okay. So, some people come to me in a deficit with a symptom, which is fine. But my job as their practitioner is to help open their eyes to the possibility of what they could have right after they've addressed the potential problem, but what they could have in the future if they just look at the stats and the facts and see where they actually stand and see where there's going to be problems in the future. Okay, the most indicative crystal ball would be, that comprehensive blood work, right? I do a VIP panel with folks. A lot of people invest that on their first time, and it tells them so much. And I'll sit down with them for 45 minutes. We'll go over that in painstaking detail. Really, put together a map that's really going to help them come up with a comprehensive, cogent plan of like, hey, how am I going to address some of these things that are starting to sag? How am I going to support these things that are looking great? What are some things that I can add, subtract, right? What are ways that I'm going to make sure that, when I hit the age of 55, that I'm still going to have awesome energy. I'm still going to be strong. I'm still going to be athletic. I'm still going to be able to hit the weight room. I'm still going to be able to go, hike with my family and go on ski trips, so on and so forth. So it's just such a critical piece. You're missing out on this critical piece if you're not, investing in this particular category of your health. So with this podcast, I'm going to create the top 10 weaponized body panel, like my top 10 after 35. It'll be a PDF you can download. Check it out. And if anybody ever has any questions about weaponized wellness, is interested in doing, either a VIP or a basic weaponized body panel, just message me, shoot me a DM. Uh, you know, Go to the website. It's weaponizedwellness.com or drryanhewitt.com. You can always, hit me up through those channels. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Shoot me any questions, like, rate, review, all that good stuff. And I'll see you guys next time.